Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. You've seen my Vectrex quite a few times. And I've even done a video about this, my baby Pong. But I think it's time to introduce you to somebody else who's beside these two, this giant black wall. What's that all about? Well, as my thumbnail reveals, this is Vaal. Now, you're thinking to yourself, looks like a Tron machine. It is, kind of, sort of. It was at one time. Oh, and of course, if you've been following my channel, there's my computer space. But we're not talking about computer space. We're talking about Vaal. Sort of a Tron machine. Basically what this is a MAME'd cabinet that I modified way long ago, 16 years ago now. When I was a kid, I remember seeing the Tron game and the Tron cabinet and thinking, wow, that looks amazing. What an incredible machine. What a great game and what a great cabinet it comes in. And in fact, one of the biggest appeals, I'll try and show it here, is that cool 3D sort of effect that the back glass has there. Like it's actually got some depth to it. And these are just reflective mylar bits on the sides here. But it really makes for a cool effect. You've actually seen this before if you've been following my channel for a while. When I talked about, there's that little handheld Tomy 3D Sky Attack machine. I actually showed this in the background. And also when I talked about the Tron game on the Wii, I kind of used Vaal as a little bit of a backdrop there because it's the Tron machine, or as I say, it was. So what's all this doing on the side, doing down here at the bottom? And what the heck are these things on the side here? And more importantly, why do you call them Vaal? It was a Tron machine, right? Well, okay, let's get into the story. So, way back around the year 2000, or maybe just before that, a friend of mine first got me into MAME, and he explained that you can play all those games of yesteryear in MAME for free. You just map your controls on your keyboard, and you can play as many old classic arcade games as you want. And I was just like, I gotta get MAME, and I loved it. And then I asked around at work, there was a guy who had a MAME machine he had built himself out of particle board and the whole 9 yards, and I said, hey man, I would like to put this MAME computer of mine into a cabinet and, maybe put some controls along the front. What recommendations do you have since you've done this before? And the guy said, first and foremost, don't try to make it yourself. These original cabinets are really sturdily built, like they can take a punishment. They are designed for kids to be kicking them and giving them lots and lots of, abuse. Maybe not so much computer space. I mean, that's a fiberglass cabinet. That would not take a lot of knocking about and dings and stuff. In fact, you can also see there's a little bit of a scratch on the front panel there, just in the bottom left corner. Anyway, we're not talking about computer space. We're talking about Vaal. So the guy said, if you can possibly get an actual arcade cabinet, do that and just stick a machine inside, because they were actually built to last. The cabinet he put together with particle board and stuff, he said it was always getting kind of rocking back and forth. The seams would sort of break over time. It was not the way to go. He said, definitely get yourself a cabinet. And I thought, okay, well, sure. Now, a friend of mine was actually heading up to the interior of British Columbia to get a pinball machine. And he said, hey, man, it'll be a fun ride. You want to come with me? Help me hump this pinball machine in the back of the truck? Sure, yeah. Where we went was, used to be an old amusement center, sort of a summer resort area that kids would go to quite often. And the guy was selling not only the pinball machine, but he had an old warehouse full of arcade cabinets. And the guy said, hey, $100, you can take whichever one you want. I was like, really? Okay, that's a deal. Yeah, sure. And I saw this Tron there. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, I gotta have the Tron. I love this cabinet. I mean, the design is just so cool. And then I'll turn it into a MAME machine. Now, there are those people watching who are probably going to be really, really mad at me right now for turning a Tron cabinet into a MAME machine, and for that, I want to first of all apologize because I was not very smart 16 years ago. But secondly, in my defense, this wasn't a Tron when I got it. It was actually, as you can see here from the original photos when it arrived, it was an Assault cabinet. They had turned it from Tron into Assault, and the front control panel, wow, that was a mess. The thing didn't work. Like, it had a lot of problems. And the guy was like, yeah, here, $100, my son-in-law will deliver it to you. I was like, great. Got it in, took it apart, and this is the end result. This Tron MAME arcade machine was the result from that. The sides I had to repaint myself. The controller on the front I tacked on, and also that mouse, which we'll get to. And these things I actually just screwed onto the side with a little clip. These are some sort of essentially cup holders, so that during parties and stuff you can put your beer in there, and it's actually very, very handy. Now, again, the arcade purists out there are going to get super mad that I drilled holes into the side of this thing and that I changed it and that I put this control panel thing and everything else on front. How dare you? How dare you turn a Tron into a MAME machine? Again, it wasn't a MAME machine, it wasn't a Tron when I got it. It was an Assault, and a really battered up one at the time. So, yes, guilty as charged. I converted it into a MAME machine, but it's not like it was a pristine Tron when I got it. I could go into the details. Maybe I'll do that in a future video, assuming nobody gives me a lot of harassment for what I've done here. But I wanted to talk about Vaal in general. First of all, why do I call it Vaal? If anybody remembers the old Star Trek episode, The Apple, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy land on a planet where the local sort of primitive tribe are being ruled by this giant head in the side of a canyon wall, and it turns out there's actually a machine down below, and that's where the villagers call him Vaal, and they actually give him sort of sacrifices to make the god happy, and he controls the weather and he looks after them and stuff. Now, why has that name followed over to this Tron machine? Well, when I first built this, it was 2002-ish. I think I had a copy of Windows 98 that I stuck in the PC that's inside there. It's all way in at the back, and the reason there's all this whirring noise, there's a fan down there to keep it from overheating. And yeah, basically, and there's like a CRT monitor on its side there. You'll notice the screen doesn't quite fill properly like it should, but you know what? It does pretty well by my estimation. So I put Windows 98 in there and had a really good time, but I was finding every once in a while the controls were glitchy, and like I would, I don't know, be moving Pac-Man and he would just keep going even though I'd changed the direction. Like this X-Arcade control stick, by the way, I highly recommend this if you're wanting to get into this sort of thing. This is a very, very durable controller. The buttons feel really good and solid. I've actually stuck a quarter down here and over here. That's where you coin up if you wanted to play a game. The X-Arcade control stick is fantastic, and I asked the people who made it, I'm like, hey, look, I've put it into this Windows 98 machine, and for some reason it doesn't seem to work. It seems to be glitching out. It'll keep moving in its own sort of direction. And what did they do? They sent me a new motherboard for this thing. Like, I still have it in storage. And I was really impressed. I was like, wow, that's great. They were like, yeah, well, you know, sometimes there's problems with our controller, so here's a new motherboard. Great. I ended up not doing that because then there was some other situation where I started to notice even games that were using this mouse. Now, this is a Logitech mouse that just has a trackball, and I find that was really handy for games like Tron, and a few I'm going to show you in a minute. But even using this thing, it was sometimes a little glitchy, and I thought, well, wait a minute, why is that happening? So I tried a few things, I tried a few driver changes, all that kind of stuff. Then I thought I had it licked, and I had people over, and they would all be enjoying themselves, and it would start to glitch again. but it would be very temperamental. Under some circumstances, it would glitch, and in other situations, it would be fine. And I was just like, what is with this machine? Why won't it behave itself? It's like it needs sacrifices to keep it happy. Otherwise, it becomes angry and refuses to work. Just like that big machine in the side of the mountain in the Star Trek episode. So I was just like, you know what you are, you Tron main machine? You're actually like my own version of Vaal. If I make sacrifices to you and plead to the heavens, and if it's not thunder and lightning, you will behave and you will allow me to play you. And then when I've got people over, you'll misbehave and you'll not make the games playable. And it was just like, ugh. So it became a running joke when people were like, hey, how come the machine's not working? I said, oh, Vaal's in a bad mood today. So that's how he got this name. It turns out, I think it was something to do with maybe the static buildup. You've got this black light here, which looks really cool, next to this mouse and next to this controller, and they're all fed. I'll see if I can do this without the camera shaking too much. Let me just pull. I've got some stuffing in the way here, but they're all fed through some wires down there that lead way back. Let's move that out of the way. Lead way back. You can't really see it, but there's a computer back there. I think all of that interference was maybe causing Windows 98 to have some problems. So a friend of mine had a spare copy of Windows XP. He said, well, why don't we stick XP on here? And I was also actually about to upgrade the motherboard and CPU in here anyway, Vaal 2.0 as I called it. And I thought, okay, I'll put Windows XP on here and change it around. And ever since then, I got to admit, it totally started behaving itself. In fact, let me exit out of MAME here. And in fact, I'll show you. So I've got the main controls set up here for most games. I can play Pac-Man, Asteroid, Street Fighter, etc. I've got side buttons here. And there's one on the other side over here. Very handy if I want to play like a pinball machine. I've actually got that set as the pause button. And I've got this set as the escape or leave the game button. So if I press that, we'll exit out of that game. Let's just use the mouse here on the desktop. You can see it's Windows XP. If I'll go back to MAME. By the way, it's MAME 0.79 is what I'm running, so it's an old version. Anyway, bit flickery there. So yeah, once I put XP on here, it actually started really behaving itself quite well. I mean, the machine hasn't had any problems at all. So I think it was something to do with the operating system sampling these control inputs and maybe the interference from that black light. They all were just making this a bit of a mess, and sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. So luckily now with XP on there, it's been working like a charm. But he still has earned the name of Vaal. And at any parties, he is an absolute must. I always have people over, and it's a blast to play. I might go into more detail, like maybe showing how I built Vaal to begin with in some future video, but it's kind of been, he's the elephant in the room. I mean, this is my games room, and you've seen me play, there's a chess headset, a chess knight board as well. You've seen me play the Vectrex, you've seen me play Pong, and I've talked about computer space enough times, and there's my TV that I do all my retro stuff on. But Vaal has been kind of sitting here in the center, and I've been trying to shoot around him because I just thought, well, he is a whole different story in and of himself, and I need to someday address him. And so now I'm doing so. I am introducing you to one of the biggest items in this room that I've been avoiding filming for all this time. This is Vaal. Now let me show you a couple of games being played. Now I'm not going to go into a lot because you all know MAME, you know how it works, but some people might scratch their head at the control scheme in there, like how is the X Arcade for different games? I really like it because with that combined with using this trackball as a mouse actually provides most control solutions that I have. By the way, this is just a little sticker I put, or a plaque I put on, so that somebody who comes up to want to play Vaal might not understand. That uses, you can use the stick up and down to select. There's the quit, there's the pause. Some games, there's even a thing here that says, like, you want to hit that to start a game, And the thing here that says OK, that's because sometimes you'll launch games in MAME and it'll need you to say OK to certain prompts. And if you're on a PC, that's fine, but if you're not, you're in trouble. Newer versions of MAME, I've seen they've made it so you just sort of wiggle the joystick back and forth. That's the equivalent of saying OK. But in this version of MAME, you have to type OK, and that's what these two buttons are right here. They're mapped to the letter O and the letter K. Anyway, what I really like with this control scheme, say for example you want to play Asteroids. The control layout for that game on the actual hardware is just buttons with left and right, fire and thrust, and hyperspace. And when you're playing it with this controller, you can actually map the buttons to be that way. I really, really like that. For playing Tron itself, I move the mouse controller over a bit, and I can actually kind of jury-rig a solution. I can make it work with the trackball as that spinner, move around with the stick with my right hand, and then kind of slam down on one of the buttons with my fist in order to fire the button. That works too. And the great thing with this control panel is it's also very good for Street Fighter. I mean, you've got the 6 buttons. They work really, really well. This is why all the X arcades have the button layout that they have. It's great. How is that Logitech mouse as a trackball? Well, I play Missile Command with it, and it works just perfectly. And again, because I've got the 3 buttons from the X arcade, I can actually replicate what Missile Command should be played like quite easily. Of course, no MAME machine would be complete without Dragon's Lair, and this game works just great. Of course, that's only the joystick and 1 button, but I may show someday how I got Daphne running Dragon's Lair on Vaal, because that in itself was a whole nightmare. And also, this control scheme does work if you wanted to do driving games. Here's me playing Spy Hunter. It's very hard to see the screen itself, but you can see I can move that Logitech mouse or trackball left and right as if it's a steering wheel, and I can control the game quite well. It is actually a very good solution. Anyway, there is Vaal, my MAME machine. Apologies that I did turn a Tron cabinet into a MAME arcade machine, but it's been getting a lot of love over the years, and I'm just very, very pleased. It was a big project, it took a lot of work, and I love it. And before I sign off, one other minor benefit of this blacklight is in the room here, it does make the poster behind me with the Darkstalkers characters on it glow in a neat, sort of an eerie light. There is Vaal, my MAME machine. Apologies to any arcade enthusiasts and purists. I know, I shouldn't have done it, but I look at it as if I rescued him, and he gets a lot of love that way. Right, until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.